So I've covered quite a lot of areas here. So how do you take things forward? Develop an action plan. Here are some of the key things you might want to consider doing. Writing your goals down. I mean, you know, the classic one is where do you want to be in 5 years' time, or where does your organization want to be in 5 years' time? Because the thinking behind that is if you've got goals, you work towards those goals. Part and parcel of that is list the barriers to you achieving success, whatever they are. It could be a lack of finance, lack of skills. It may not help you overcome them, but at least you'll have identified them. It might throw up things you're not necessarily always consciously thinking of. And you can design a plan to reduce the influence of each obstacle and increase the chances that you will be successful in reaching your goals. So I think those two are very, very important. You know, these are kind of basic things that you need to do. Again, within that, list the achievement of reaching your goals, know exactly what you will gain from reaching them, whatever they are. And then you can break them down into parts, subsidiary goals. I think one of the key things to address is improving your skills. I attended a webinar recently where the presenter said, I'm always working towards improving my skills. So that I can address all of the issues within my business. Because obviously if you develop your skills to address whatever the gaps are in what you're doing or the obstacles, then that's going to make you more successful. So that's something, improving skills. Again, there's quite a lot out there at the moment, a lot of free stuff. If anybody's interested in that, then please talk to me afterwards. Again, we're offering some in some aspects of that ourselves. Get support from others. It can be other people you know. It could be people you know have got particular skills in particular areas, whatever they are. Expanding your skills and knowledge base is a constant process these days. And it's one of the problems, particularly when people come out of organizations. If you work for an organization, whatever it is, if it's a big one, you usually get skills and other training as part of that job. When you're running your own organization or you're self-employed, you don't necessarily get that. So you've got to keep your professional skills up to date. Indeed, changes in the marketplace or changes in technology may result in the need to acquire new skills. So where can you get help and support on this? Again, here is a few links. There's a London Business Hub, that's one of them. There's the business finance support link that I gave earlier. There are many enterprise agencies around, and there's also stuff usually on your local authority's website about a whole range of things you can do. But that's very, very important these days because technology is changing so quickly that you need to get your skills and knowledge as up to date as possible. Okay, I've covered an awful lot of ground, but it's taken almost exactly 1 hour. So thank you for bearing with me. And I'm now going to take any questions. Has anybody got any questions? You can raise your hand either on the screen or you can raise it physically if you're online. I can't see anybody right now. So while you're thinking about that, what I'm going to do is we're just coming up to 3 o'clock now, so I'm going to try and get our first guest online, which is Lauren. Are you there? Good. I was hoping you'd say that.
Hello, Gary. How are you? Let me just turn my sound up. I'm on my phone, which is the wonders of modern technology.
Yes, because Lauren's out and about today, so
You can see a lovely background, which is not my normal office background. So I'm in an exalted area at the moment, and it's very relaxing. And I've been listening to all of Gary's very extensive information, and so much of that in the hour he's provided you with so many tools and so many things that will have a real effect on any business that you set up and run. It's like the condensed version of how to do everything. I'm very impressed. I want a copy.
Okay.
It's almost like my life. What's quite interesting is that I've got I was counting up whilst you were doing this, and I was thinking about the years of how things have changed. I've got over 40 years experience. I started in the creative business when I was 18. You know, I can't even begin to imagine how long ago it was. And during that time, listening to what you were talking about, Gary, what came home to me most was how adaptable we've all had to be. And in the early days, of course, we didn't have the technology. We didn't have any of the support. A lot of the key things that you've covered in the hour, we had to deal with. That a lot of it hasn't changed. But what we now have, we have the pressures of the technical and the digital world and the additional skills. And we have the tools to be able to help us to answer some of the problems which I faced in my career and didn't effectively have all those tools. So using the online and the internet and using the links that Gary's provided you with and building your skills, I think would be one of the key things that I would advise on from my experience, that I've added skills and I'm still adding skills. Even yesterday, I was attending seminars and watching things. I've been in the creative world with advertising agencies, marketing agencies, and also music and development of talent and singers. Very competitive, all extremely competitive worlds. And the key to it has been adaptability, using and searching out things that made me different and added value to what I was doing, and then adding skills on and changing according to the market that was coming up at the right time and trying to be a bit ahead of everybody. So, you know, don't wait until everybody else has done it. I spend a lot of time on social media, looking at groups, watching what's coming out of the groups, who's coming up with the ideas, and then developing them and using them in my day-to-day life, because there's so much out there. And that's one of the things nowadays that is so much more helpful than my early life. You know, that we've actually got to the point where it's very easy to do. And I'm a bit addicted to it. So I'm a techie person that spends all my life just basically watching and seeing, and then using that to be adaptable into how you then actually make your business stand out, be different. And I think Gary opened up his initial conversation about don't make it about cost, but make it about how you're slightly different to everybody else. And I would very much say that in my experience, that is very key to success. Also, I think use it what you consider is success. Success is different to everybody. And Gary talked about writing a list of objectives and having a plan. But I think also it's quite clever and quite useful to think about what are your objectives. You know, do you want to be at the top of the world and a millionaire or a billionaire and having a massive career? Do you want to keep your family? Do you want to try to have a balance between the two, which is something that we're now all looking at, which in my early life, we never looked at that. There was no balance. Everything was completely out the window, whereas nowadays it is a balance. So I think adding that to your plan at the beginning or in the early stages of when you're working on something, I think that would again be a form of advice that I would give, because it keeps the reality about everything as to how and where you're going and what you're going to do and how you're going to get there. I haven't traditionally moved out of the creative world. So perhaps part of the success is looking at which world you want to actually physically be in, and developing how that's going to move forward for you, because it's always a changing. So I don't know if that's useful. A lot of the stuff Gary's covered. So, you know, whilst I would talk for hours about how and where and what you do and how you set things up and how you would then develop them and what you could do to achieve and so on and so forth, I'd just be repeating, quite frankly, what Gary has done a fantastic job on putting together for you. But I'm very happy to answer any questions or give any feedback, and if anybody can benefit from my long time in doing all of this, then that's part of my mission, is to help and get people moving forward. So I don't know if you had any things that you wanted to ask Gary, or if you wanted to put it out. Or...
Thanks, Lauren. One of the things I would like to ask you is there one piece of, you know, you've had a lot of experience, you're one of the most experienced people that I know in the creative sector, that's why I'm always talking to you about it. What is the one piece of advice you would give to people, particularly people who are new to this or are just starting off? Is there only one piece of advice you would give?
I think adaptability is the key thing. I think getting all your eggs in the basket, in other words, all the things that you've provided to people with, making sure that you're covered legally, making sure that you've got the insurances in place, making sure that you've got all of the items that you need. I traditionally probably wouldn't have done a lot of that. And I think it makes your life difficult a bit further down the line. If you're creative, you too tend to think about, oh, isn't it wonderful? Let's be creative. And you've got a creative thought in your, and that's how you approach things. But I think that a lot of the things that you've talked about, the good housekeeping elements, and joining the right kind of societies, and just basically making sure that we can't be sued for a start, or that you can't be seen to be out of step with things. So good housekeeping and making sure that that's in place, I think, is quite strong. And that's probably something that I would not have recommended years ago. I wouldn't even have thought about it. But probably with my association of the work that you're doing, it brings that home to me. And though it's a bit boring, and for a creative person, it is a bit boring, I think it's a really good thing to do.
Okay. Thank you for that. Another quick question. Can you give us an example of a problem that you've had or an issue that you've had and how you overcame it?
Gosh, there's been so many. I think you learn from your mistakes. I've definitely learned from my mistakes. I think some of the problems is in saying yes to people, and trying to overachieve. So basically saying to people when they want a project done or whatever, saying, well, yes, of course we can do that and more, and adding more and more and more to something, and then getting to the point where actually you're starting to fail because you've overdone things, and that comes down to being a yes person. And what I've done now to stop me from doing that is I make sure that I do a really strong proposal. So the proposal covers everything. So in the proposal, I think about it before I promise to do things. And then that just means that the proposal is much more what we're going to do, rather than when the client starts to say, oh, can you just add this? And can you just add that? Well, no, it's not in the proposal. And that's been the solution to my natural thought process of adding extra onto everything.
Okay, thank you for that. And there's been some very, very useful advice there. Does anybody want to ask Lauren any questions or ask her to clarify anything? I can't see anybody. Lauren, if you can put your details in the chat, if people want to, and indeed that goes for all the people who are going to briefly speak today, please put your details in the chat. So
extremely good session, and I've been learning from it as well. Much appreciated for inviting me. Really enjoyed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate you coming on. Okay, well, my next guest is Danny Targan. Danny, if you could just start by introducing yourself and telling us more about your businesses and projects.
Sure, thanks, Gary. Yeah, so I basically, I run a photography business, but it's specialized in culture and heritage sector. So it's a bit like you said with the niche department. I work for museums, archaeological excavations, galleries, publishers, artists. But I'm also a visual artist and I run my own studio. So in the cultural heritage sector is about building a reputation really, and in the visual arts it's about my own practice, if you see what I mean. So basically that's what I do.
In the development of your business or the setup of your business, are there any particular issues you've had to address that you think are of note or are worth mentioning?
Well, yeah, like Lauren said, so many. I think for the cultural heritage sector, the most difficult thing is to get your foot in the door, really, is get that opportunity within a museum. And then I think somehow with the art, it might be the same. It feels like by getting that first, it's not about having the big show, because people always think that, oh, you know, to become a successful artist, to have that big show. Is actually no, it's about finding that opportunity that is really for you. That could be a really small gallery or even an online gallery that you can collaborate with the curator, or having that commission, really small commission, you know, like tiny little amount of money that just helps you to pay just the internet. But it's getting that on your CV and carry on building a reputation that you are a maker. So yeah, I think for me that two of those things were quite difficult to get my head around. Yeah.
Okay. Again, have you got any particular advice for people who are either new or just starting to develop their businesses or projects in the arts and photography?
I think both. You have to be very organized. I think this is for the long run, and you have to be patient. I think there is a lot of competition, but also a massive pressure to succeed. And then what is success? I think you really have to understand that this is for the long run. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And to be able to carry on like a marathonist, you can't just out of the blue go running a marathon. You have to every day, or at least 3 times a week, run a little bit to practice. So you have to be organized. You have to put your shit together. I'm sorry, that's it.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And finally, what one piece of advice that you would offer to people on this presentation today? Is there one particular piece of advice?
I think what Lauren said really resonated with me in terms of don't forget that you nowadays you have to have a life as well, and this is great. I think now the balance between working and having time for yourself is really important. Don't burn out. I think that's, don't take jobs that you really don't want, because I think what I found out, and I found out by pure experience, of course, is that when you are really tired, you don't do a job really well. And when you are rested, you do a job really well. And then the outcome, the clients, everyone is so much happier that in the end, it's better to say no to the jobs that you really don't like, even though money-wise, you're going to be like, oh, no, I'm worried. But think carefully about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody wish to ask Danny any questions about anything she's raised? today. Judy.
Yes, hi. My question is for Danny. I have a company that sells jewelry and accessories for women. I do all of it in my company, but the main thing is to take pictures. So my question is how you put your personal print on your work to make it different, from other I don't know, pictures that you take or another person that take the same picture. How you put that differentiator factor on that?
Very interesting question. I think taking a picture in a very technical way, it's very easy once you learn the technical, but to develop a style, you have to practice. You have to have your own personal projects. So if you have a client that wants, I missed what you said. I think there was a cut. I didn't understand exactly what kind of pictures you take. But let's say that you take pictures of babies, okay? And you want to do amazing pictures of babies. To practice on the client is very difficult. You don't have the time and you don't want to basically make a mistake. So what you have to be doing is practice your style all the time in something else. Have a small project, because then it keeps you also, if your mind thinking about it, but you don't give the pressure of when you're there, you have to think, it becomes second nature. So you have to have personal projects. That's how I would do. And then slowly you realize that to develop a project, a style, sorry.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from Tanaz. How did you get that opportunity to work with a museum? How did you open that door for yourself? Also, are you a sole trader or a limited company?
I am a sole trader, and with the museum, basically, museum world is terrible. They think that you have to work for free because they have no money. So what I did, I had a full-time job at something completely, mundane, coffee, anything, and then I applied to be a volunteer during the weekends or even for my days off. So basically for a year, I used all my holidays working as a volunteer in museums to make contact, and then realized that through that I could volunteer inside the studios, because the studios don't like volunteers. You have to know them. So I went all the way around. I created basically a plan in my head how I was going to get there.
Okay, thank you for that, Danny. Does anybody else want to ask Danny any questions? No, I can't see any more. Okay, thank you very much, Danny.
Thank you, Gary.
I'd like to introduce our next guest, and I can see some of her artwork behind her. This is Rosie Eaglin. So over to you, Rosie. If you can start by just introducing yourself and telling us more about your business or your work. You're on mute, Rosie. That's it.
That's it. Always catches me out, that. Yeah, I'm Rosie Eaglin. I'm a visual artist, but I'm also a musician insofar that I'm a singer and vocalist with the band. In my visual artist sort of capacity, I'm a painter, printmaker, and I also make ceramics. And then with the band, I write lyrics, and with my band partner, we produce the songs, we record the songs, we mix them down, we master them, and then we self-release our own music. Okay, and what are the main issues you've had to face in developing these two quite distinctive strands of work? I think the main issue is that you can't really keep them apart. They overlap. And I think you have to recognise that, which can also be very useful. So as far as the musical side of things, I can then design our covers or any artwork or anything like that that we need to do with promoting the music. So that's been, I think, quite helpful to me. I also put together the videos with images, photographs that I've taken. So that, I think, has enhanced our about reputation, but it's enhanced our presence on the music scene.
Sounds good.
I suppose the other thing, the main sort of issues I think I've had to deal with is thinking about particularly the visual art. Who is my work for? I think basically I have to say at the end of the day that it's for myself. Because if I try to capture a market or try to follow something that I think will be attractive or something that someone might want to buy, I think this is quite difficult, because I think you then lose what it is that you're actually really trying to do if you do that, and the work is no longer your own, and therefore I think, I'm not sure if I would say it's valueless, but it certainly doesn't mean so much. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but
Okay, thank you. There's a few comments online for you, Rosie. One, I think this is from Sarah. Is Rosie, send us a link to your band. That's the first one.
right, okay.
And then Shirley asks, what is your genre of music? And Drank says, hey Rosie, I'm a music producer and visual artist, would love to connect.
Right, okay.
So put your details in the chat, please, everybody.
Yeah, okay, we'll do. Okay, so genre of music, I think this is always a difficult one. I can get away with it by saying, well, okay, we're indie, but that's probably not specific enough. I can talk about influences perhaps more than the genre. I suppose our influences come from Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, Patti Smith, Neil Young. So it's quite a wide influence. We've been told that we sound very shoegaze. I don't know if that's a term that everybody has heard of before. But again, that's sort of can be quite wide. So difficult to describe our genre. I think it's better for people to listen and decide for themselves. So I think lots of things come into it. Country music, Velvet Underground, punk to a certain degree because of the ethos, really high-techy musical, you know, the idea that everyone must be a brilliant musician. That's not really what we're about. We're about the sentiment behind the music, the lyrics and the sound. Okay, yeah. What was the other question? Yeah. I've forgotten.
Tell us what your band's called.
Okay, so it's called Rugosa Hips. That's Rugosa is a rose, and where we used to live, we were surrounded by these Japanese Rugosa roses. So we decided to call ourselves after the plants that surrounded us, really.
That's RUGOSA, hips, HIPS.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. I know them well. I'm a big fan of Rosie's music, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get her on here today. What have you got? One piece of advice that you could give to people, Rosie?
Yes, I think in both the fine art and the music business, you can end up paying an awful lot of money to other people on the promise that they will give you a show. You know, they will told me that quite often. Sorry.
It's the connection went a little bit.
All right. Experience told me that quite often you can both occasions and not get an awful lot of return. I think you have to pick and choose what you spend your money on, because otherwise you'll end up broke before you make any money at all.
Yeah, end up broke chasing your dream.
Yeah.
Bit of sage advice there from Rosie, who incidentally used to be the principal of an adult education college at one time. So she's had quite a wide and varied career. And any other questions for Rosie? I'm just looking down the chat here. This is from Ian. Hello, Rosie. What do you mean by self-release, streaming, records, CD?
Okay, so self-release, we do not have a record company or a production company working with us or for us. So we put our music out on platforms such as Bandcamp, SoundCloud, Spotify. I'm not very happy with Spotify, so I try and avoid them. But I know our music is on there, regardless of whether we like it or not, because other people have made playlists. So it is there as well. But yeah, so it's doing it all ourselves, really, in a true sort of punk method. Yeah,
so it's self-reliance, basically.
Yes.
And releasing things. Ian, got a question?
Yeah, that question was from me, because when I used to do music years ago, it was physical music, records, and I find people don't make records or CDs anymore. So that's why I asked that question. But my other question is, are you with PRS as well? How does that work with Bandcamp?
Yes, PRS and PPL. So we register all our music and our releases. So the music, the lyrics, or the songs, if you like, are registered with PRS, and then we register the recordings and the releases with PPL.
PPL, what's PPL, Rosie?
You're going to ask me what it stands for now. I can't remember what it stands for, but basically it's a sister branch. It's a sister company to
PRS, yeah, which is the Performing Rights Society.
Yeah. So PPL, they are the branch which when you register a recording with, and you also register a release. So they will collect royalties when the recording is played, as opposed to say, for example, you do a live performance with your own music, you can get royalties from PRS with that. But if it's a recording, you need to go to PPL. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's made that clear. So anybody else got any questions for Rosie? I can't see anymore. Well, I kind of, it's interesting. I'm now going to introduce Sarah Garrod, who kind of encompasses all of the areas we've just talked about. So it's kind of, I've got the phasing of the interviews today. So thank you for joining us, Sarah. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your business and project.
Sure. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Because I'm in my studio. Sometimes it's not very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I've got a lot in common with the previous speakers. I'm also a photographer / artist and a musician. And the last couple of years, I've probably been doing 80% photography, 20% music, because to be honest, it's very hard to make a living out of music. So during the pandemic, it's been all thrusters to saving my photography business. And of course, I was mainly a live musician, so all the gigs dried up over the pandemic. We're now gigging again with my band, which is called Zara. We're a rock band. And I started as a self-employed 30 years ago. And to begin with, I worked in television. And I worked my way up from being a runner, assistant director, to a director and producer, and in TV. And I did that for a while. And then I had 2 kids. After the second one, it was kind of impossible to be going around on location. And I did hit that awful burnout stage that we talked about earlier. And then I took up photography more or less as a hobby to start with. And through that, I became a portrait photographer. And then over the last, say, 10 years, I've been developing more into kind of fine art photography, and I help set up a local darkroom, and I work in kind of experimental photography techniques, and I take art commissions and work on funded projects like that.
Okay. What are the main issues you've touched on some of them, but what are the main issues you've had to overcome, would you say, particularly in the last couple of years? If there's anything you can highlight.
Well, I think the kind of secret to me keeping afloat all this time is just being very adaptable, really. And I don't mind that. I think some people enjoy that. So over the pandemic, I started doing loads of online photography workshops where I was sending out kits of materials to people, and I did loads and loads of those. I mean, looking back on it, that was a great thing to do and to connect people over the pandemic in lockdown. But now, of course, I'm back in the kind of real world kind of stuff. So I've, looking back on it, was that any use at all doing that year? Well, it kept me afloat, but I probably need to be more planned and directed in my work, because like I think Rosie said, or someone said earlier, it's very easy to say yes to everything. So I end up kind of doing a long hours, working all night on various things, and I probably should be more selective.
Okay, so is there one piece, you know, again, you're a person with a lot of experience. Is there one piece of advice you would give to people on this presentation today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mistake a lot of new businesses make is not knowing their market when they start out. So I think you have to do months of market research. I think you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's going to buy your work, and go out and buy someone else's work in your field and see how it goes, and just do interviews with people who might buy your work. It's always useful because you never know, those people might even end up as future clients. And also just be aware that once you do get into the profession, a creative profession, you do spend like 80% of your time marketing, networking, admin. The actual time you spend doing something like a gig or writing a song or making a photograph is tiny compared to all the other things.
Okay, we've got a question for you here from Drank. How did you go about setting up the online classes, and what materials did you give out?
Okay, well, I have my own website, which is one I knocked up with WordPress, so that's quite easy. And I just had I'd been doing kind of Zoom photography talks and things in the past because I specialize in some niche types of photography, so I'd often been asked to do talks, and it was really a step on from that. So on my website, I just advertised the class, the workshop, the price. You put a little PayPal link, people pay, and it really took off. Every single workshop I did was fully booked, and of course I had to market it. And in the kits, I was doing stuff like sun printing. So I was coating paper and sending it out to people. I was doing toning. I was making up little packets of toners and things and sending those out. So there was quite a lot of fiddly work going on, but it was quite unique. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And has anybody else got any questions for Sarah, or indeed any of our other panel members that have been here today? I can't see any. I'd just like to thank everybody for speaking today, for Lauren, Danny, Sarah and Rosie for giving up the time. The second part of this is always the bit that I find most interesting. So please, if you can all put your details in the chat, then people can get access to this. This recording will be available on the Future Communities website in due course. And
sorry, Gary, I do have a question. My microphone wasn't plugged in, so.
Okay, go on.
So I'm Andrew. I'm a writer. I write poetry. I'm looking to be registered as self-employed. And I'm also looking at applying for 1 or 2 grants centered around poetry and its effect on well-being. And I noticed you mentioned that it's very difficult to get funding when you're self-employed. And I wonder if that's something that, you know, me as a writer would face as well. So that's one of the questions I've got. I've got another one, but if you would like to address that one first.
Yeah,
please.
sure. I'll do that first. Yeah, it is always a challenge for an individual, a sole trader, to get any kind of grant funding. But there are some, because of the area that you're in, for example, the Arts Council may have some grants. And there's a number of other organisations that will support writers. You'd have to do some specialist research. I'm just trying to think of some offhand. I think there's the English Poetry Society, and there's a number of writers' organisations that organise. The other thing, of course, that they do as well is they organise competitions for poets. There's a lot of good things on the Sky Arts channel, incidentally, at the moment, and there are potential funding sources that you can get as an individual across the arts. There are some charitable trusts that will support individual artists as well. I'm trying to think of one. There's a big charitable trust linked to the founders of Tesco, whose name escapes me for the moment, but they will fund individual artists. And the Paul Hamlin Foundation that I mentioned earlier, they will definitely consider funding any kind of creatives, but you know, you've got to make a case for it. And there's probably others that I could identify given a bit of time. If you want to ask me your other question now, Andrew. I don't know whether he's having problems with his mic again. We'll see. Hopefully, he might. I'll give it a minute.
I'm back.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good. Sorry about that. So I've stopped at 2 libraries, and just to see if they'll carry copies of my book. And one of the things that they're both asking me about is to run or get involved with workshops with them, or come in on Saturdays to do readings for groups of their clients, various ages. And I'm wondering, I never asked them this, but you know, as you guys are in the arts, and maybe you'll be able to answer this question. If I'm going to do something like that, would libraries rather to have people who are self-employed to be used in situations like that, or as a unregistered person, I could just get involved and that's it?
I thought you were going to ask me, would you get paid? And I think
I believe I would.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on your employment status. As if you've got a job, then you know, on PAYE, then that may not be an issue. If however, you're self-employed and poetry is your main source of income, you'll have to kind of declare that, if that's the question that you're asking me. It does depend on the circumstances, and of course these days across the arts there's an awful lot expected, as I'm sure my colleagues will tell you, for free. So my policy is always to ask for money first.
Yeah. It's a good one, thanks.
And then, because you can just ask if you're getting paid. Danny, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So Andrew, I work a lot with public sector. So it's much easier if you have your self-employed number. They will not hire you without it, unless it's all done on a volunteer basis. And even if it's a volunteer basis, you have to ask for a contract.
Okay, I see.
Because there are so many rules and rights that you have as a volunteer. So you could get, for instance, you should get, depending on how long you're running a workshop, food, transport, paid. So there are lots of things that you should talk about. You just don't go there, you know. But if you are, I was for a long time full-time employed and a self-employed simultaneously, because I was doing those odd jobs for museums on my days off.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to have if it's paid, you have to have your self-employed number. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, Danny, and thank you, Gary.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we've clarified that now. But
yeah,
there are, earlier in the presentation and the one that I'm going to send out, I think the links to self-employment are out there. But if you just go on gov.uk, that's the government's website, www.gov.uk, and then search for self-employment, all those links will come up. And it will tell you what to do. In fact, because it's the government website, you can probably go straight through to HMRC and register right now. I'm not suggesting you should do that. You might want to consider it. But all those links will definitely be there.
Since you just mentioned that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but since on that note, so many years ago, so I'm employed full-time as a teacher now, okay? But many years ago, I was self-employed and I still have that number. It is a matter of just calling them and get that reactivated, isn't it? Or does it change?
I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure that the record system. I think what you need to do is they have a helpline, HMRC have a helpline.
Yeah.
Just phone them up, you know, because, you know, the government wants more revenue. So if they think they can generate revenue from you, they're going to be helpful.
Yeah.
I can promise you that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. And does anyone else wish to ask any questions? No, I can't see anymore. Then I would just like to finish by thanking all my guests today, Danny, Sarah and Rosie, and Lauren, who was elsewhere in the country, for coming on today. The second part of this is always the most interesting one to me. I'm sure it's for you rather than listening to lots of technical measures and me droning on about them, but they are essential. We will be running some further events. The next one will be about a month or so. If you should all be on our mailing list. If you're not, then please email us. You'll find out more in due course. And thank you for joining us today. I much appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for being here today. All the best. Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much.